at the center of every conversation we have at Tennessee Achieves. But really, the idea of Knox Achieves was born out of, could we create a world-class workforce for our community in Knox County? And it certainly was a similar philosophy when Governor Haslam launched Tennessee Promise in 2014. So business and industry has been central to the Tennessee Achieves journey and story. I'm super excited for all of you to hear this important, critical perspective today. I'm going to turn it over to Graham to introduce our panelists, but I wanted to let you know that at the end of the session, we will be taking any questions that you have. There's a chat box where you can chat with the panelists or chat with one another. At the bottom of this Zoom function, you can also find a space for questions and answers. So at the end of the session, I'll pop back on and ask your questions to our panelists. I would be remiss if I didn't say that these people are some of my favorite people on the planet who you're about to meet and hear from, people who, like Tim Williams, that I've admired and learned from for over a decade. But for now, I will introduce Graham Thomas, Deputy Director. It's hard for me, Graham, with your title. Like, what is your title? I can never remember.
The last 12 years.
Deputy Director of Partnerships. I have to change it. Graham's had like 10 titles. So anyway, Graham, who's been with us 11 years now, which is hard to believe, but he wakes up every day and puts students first, and I'm super thankful for him. So Graham, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Chrissy, and thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. Do a real quick introduction to everybody. I'm going to start with Tim Williams. Tim was one of our founding board members. He's the CEO of 21st Mortgage, where I worked before coming to Tennessee Achieves. So Tim has led the organization that I've worked for in some form or fashion for almost my entire professional career. And I think it's safe to say that there are very few people that have given more of their time and their resources to Tennessee Achieves over the last 12 years than Tim Williams. So Tim, thank you so much for being here. Thanks. We've got Beth Duffield, who is the Senior Vice President of Workforce and Education Initiatives for the Rutherford County Chamber. Beth has been a friend of our program since the launch of Tennessee Promise. Absolutely is our champion in the Rutherford County, Murfreesboro area. She's the person that we pick up and call with all of our crazy ideas when we need a favor, and appreciate Beth being here with us today as well. And finally, we have Chelsea Johnson, who is the Director of Public Relations for BlueCross BlueShield of Tennessee. We have a mentor competition amongst our largest employers in the state of Tennessee that BlueCross BlueShield of Tennessee has won every single year since the launch of Tennessee Promise, and Chelsea has been a really big part of that, and the support of Chelsea and her team has certainly helped guide the way for us in Chattanooga and Southeast Tennessee. And Chelsea, we're glad you could join us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Well, we're going to dive into some questions. Like Chrissy said, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions to our panelists, but we've got a few planned. Tim, we're going to start with you. You were a founding board member and have been supportive of Tennessee Achieves since it was Knox Achieves when Randy, Mayor Ragsdale, and then Mayor Haslam approached you in 2008. Why did you decide to support the mission then, and why do you continue to support it now more than a decade later?
Graham, you know, I'm reminded every day just how lucky I am to be in a position to support tnAchieves and the Boys and Girls Club, and really any organization that's trying to help people grow and improve their position in life. And I'm this past weekend, I was reading Jim Haslam's biography, and it's autobiography, and you should read that. It's terrific. One of the things he talks about is how lucky he is, and I know I've been incredibly lucky. But when Randy Boyd approached me and Rich Ray to meet with him and Mayor Ragsdale and Mayor Haslam at the time about the idea of Knox Achieves at that time, and asked us to join him for an organizational meeting, I didn't really have to think about that very long, because it's always been something that I believe if you've been lucky, if you've made some money, you owe it to give back and to help those who could have been in your position. And or could hopefully, you could have been in their position. And, one of the things that allowed me to be successful over the years is education. And so I thought it was really right down my alley to be involved with the organization of tnAchieves. And the idea of sending people to college is near and dear to my heart, because I was the first or second in my family to graduate college, and it has meant everything to me. This past weekend, there was an article by Dr. Bill Lyons that was running the News Sentinel, and I guess tnAchieves had something to do with the basis for that article. But he talks about the impact of education on social issues. And really the point of his article was the lack of education and the correlation between that and the challenges for people in low-income communities, and the high crime rates, and the poverty, and the healthcare issues, and the drug addiction, and all of those issues. The biggest correlating characteristic is a lack of education. And so I became a supporter of tnAchieves because I know that education made all the difference in my life. And if we want a great community, we've got to help everybody get a good education to go as far as they can possibly go. And my goal is to have a better community for my family and my grandkids to live in the future. And that starts with education.
And Tim, I'm about halfway through Mr. Haslam's book. It's a really good read. We'll put a plug in there as another big supporter of our program. Randy told the story yesterday about approaching you, and he said that you agreed as long that you would raise half of the money if he would be the chairman. And we debated about who got off the hook easier there. But what are the benefits for a company like 21st Mortgage? You're a really large employer in Knoxville. I think one of the largest employers of recent UT grads. What type of benefits does a program like this have for a company like 21st?
Yeah, so as you know, I think we recruited you right out of school. I believe that's true. Shake your head, yes, that's true. And that's where we get most of our team members. So 21st Mortgage has about 850 team members in the Knoxville community. We've grown from basically zero. The key is being able to find good people with education. So we're the largest employer out of the University of Tennessee, but we recruit other campuses in the area. But so you've got that issue. It's really supported us in finding good people. But the other thing is once we find people, they've got to feel comfortable that this is a great place to raise a family. And so Knoxville is going to be and our surrounding communities, Knox County, is going to be a great place to raise a family if we have good schools, we have low crime, we have good race relations, and there's an overall positive environment in the community. So it starts with education. And if we're going to have a good place to live, we've got to make sure people have good educational opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tim. Beth, I'm going to ask you kind of a similar question. When we launched Tennessee Promise in 2015, the Chamber jumped right on board, helped us get out in the community and find mentors, and has really been a champion ever since. So why did the Chamber decide to support Tennessee Promise in those early days? And 6 years later, why are you guys still here?
Absolutely. So my funny story is that I found out about tnAchieves 2013, 2014, and was really excited about the opportunity. I think I talked with you and Chrissy about how do we bring that to Rutherford County, and actually had a whole meeting set up. Randy was supposed to be there. We had folks coming, chamber members, community members, because we were going to have to raise like $1 million to make this happen in Rutherford County. And then kind of Governor Haslam and Randy stole my thunder because they came out the day before and announced Tennessee Promise. So, well, that was the good news. We didn't have to raise $1 million anymore. So we were already on board before. We were cool before we even knew it was cool to be cool. But when we started looking at workforce development in Rutherford County, really seriously from the Chamber's perspective in 2013, absolutely, to Tim's point, education is the way to go. And that doesn't mean everyone needs a 4-year degree right off. And so looking at opportunities to get more students into our TCATs and our community colleges, this just made sense. I had experience with the Virginia community college system where students who attended community college in Virginia, and many of them attended for free through similar programs to Tennessee Promise, could be then immediately accepted to any state school in Virginia as a 4-year student and got a discount because the state recognized that it makes a much stronger financial sense for students to start in a community college. And it's a win for our 4 years because we know that data shows that students that start at a community college complete at higher rates at a 4-year university. So it's a win-win for students, for community colleges, for our 4 years, and then ultimately for our employers, because we need folks coming out with some type of education past high school to fill the high demand jobs that we have in construction and healthcare, IT, manufacturing, and supply chain. So it was just a natural fit with our overall workforce development strategy.
So Beth, what are you hearing from your employers in Rutherford County and maybe in the Middle Tennessee region? Any impact since Tennessee Promise has been launched, and what is the potential impact even a few more years down the road?
So I think for us, Tennessee Promise is definitely making an impact. We are putting more students, having students complete post-secondary. I think one of the great opportunities we have going forward is helping those students, and we start here in Rutherford County working with students really in elementary school, but heavily in middle and high school, to help them identify what their career goals are before they go on to college. So helping them understand that completing a post-secondary college 2-year, 4-year degree is going to help them find a good paying job that will help them create a personal economic lifestyle as well as impact the community. But we need to help them really understand what those career opportunities are before they start into that degree program, whatever they choose, so that they complete faster and they can find a good fit once they complete their education, whatever level that is. I think that's where we're going to start to see the bigger impact with our employers. Yes, we're having more complete and graduate, but we want to make sure they're fits for companies in our community so that we can pull them right into those companies and fill those jobs like Tim has done with 21st Century in Knoxville.
Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea, I remember when we launched Tennessee Promise in 2015, BlueCross BlueShield was one of the first really large employers that we didn't already have some kind of relationship with to open their doors and have us invite us on campus. I remember coming early, you were there, Calvin Anderson and Roy Vaughn were there. You guys always had lunch or breakfast for people to come and learn more about it. Why was BlueCross BlueShield, why did you guys jump on board so early?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Food, right? That's always the answer. No, I think that this was such a natural fit for Blue Cross. We are in the business literally of removing barriers, whether it's for our members with access to care or if it's our employees with access to education for their family members. We have now we have about 6,000 employees across the state, and it's important that we encourage and then also help support any kind of resources that are available for our employees and their children who are looking at secondary education opportunities. It's also the secondary side effect of it is that we have an employee base that really loves to volunteer. And they come from all different backgrounds, all different types of education backgrounds, experience levels, that sort of thing. And so, we really believe in that volunteer spirit. And so through our Team Blue program, we could offer this as an opportunity for our employees to get involved. And, we were talking prior to the start of this. There are people out there that love kind of a one and done as their bandwidth allows. And then there are others that really want the opportunity to dig in and to get to know the people that they're working with and to really feel like they are making a difference and an impact in kids' lives. And this was a perfect example of that. Getting to know the students, getting to know them personally, being able to help advise and or just guide them through the difficult process of figuring out what it is to look into school past high school. Figuring out that's a really tough age to be figuring out, if you don't already know what you want to do, how you get through those gen ed opportunities, and then reiterating to the students how that's going to open doors for them as they move forward. But this was really a win-win for Blue Cross, and we're also apparently competitive. So if anybody wants to, to challenge us this year to the number of mentors that we'll bring on, we'll be up for the challenge, I'm sure.
You probably don't even know this, but before the launch of Promise, Chattanooga was the only major metropolitan area in Tennessee that we weren't already working in. And I think Chrissy and I went to Chattanooga a dozen times in those 3 years and got really close and never could quite make it work. And I tell people all the time that without your support at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I know you have a friendly competition with your neighbors across the hill there with Unum, that we really would have been lost in Chattanooga without that business support. I think more so than any of the other major metropolitan areas, the business community in Chattanooga has really supported our program. You mentioned that you enjoy that friendly competition. I think 21st Mortgage is the only other company that's ever given us more than 100 from one place in 1 year, but you have led that competition now for 6 years in a row. So why is it important that you're engaging your employees, and what have been some of your strategies to get your employees to participate?
Well, the other piece of the culture at Blue Cross is continued education. We have a lot of great professional development opportunities and training and that sort of thing for our employees. And so it was, again, a natural fit for us to say it's important that we're making sure education opportunities are there for students in our communities. And in order to do that, we need to show our support by offering mentors and getting involved. And I was actually really impressed with the number of mentors that we had that don't have kids of their own, but to Tim's point, recognize the value of education and the need to support it so that when these students are walking their way through that academic journey, that it truly becomes a pipeline. And that we can start looking at that as exposure and opportunities to share experience where they don't feel alone, they're not on the journey by themselves, and that there are opportunities out there if they stick with it and hit all of these necessary milestones to comfortably and successfully complete the program.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to all of you supporting Tennessee Achieves and helping us find mentors and engaging your business or your business community, you all have also served as mentors. So why is it important that you have also served in this role? And any favorite stories over the last, Tim, for you, 12 years, any favorite stories in your time as a mentor?
Well, I'll share the first year. There was a kid over in South Knoxville, South Doyle High School, and this isn't really a positive story, but it kind of makes the point that we as a community, we can't start working on these kids too soon. I think the mentor program is a challenge in that a lot of times the kids are intimidated to talk with us, and so you can't force a kid to take advantage of having a mentor. They've got to want to do it, and but I've had some that really embraced it, and it makes you feel good when they embrace it and that they let you try to help them. But this one particular kid early on, I was trying to be gun ho and chase him down, and I even went over to his house and found out that the kid wasn't attending school. So my point is this: tnAchieves is addressing the challenge with kids on one level, but they've got to get to that level where they're motivated to have a good experience through high school and be in a position to benefit from what tnAchieves has to offer. And not every kid has done that, and this particular kid hadn't. And so when we look at the challenges with young people, it's kind of like peeling an onion. You've got to get them early, and sometimes we get there too late. And I think in that case we did. But I've got other situations where you find out what a kid needs, and I've helped some of these people find jobs, and you start talking to them and saying, well, if I'm going to help you find a job, you got to level with me, or you're going to pass a drug screen. And so then you find out that, no, I've smoked some dope. And so then you find out, well, that's not a kid that I'm going to help them find that particular job, but I can help them find another job and also help them understand that you've got to stay away from marijuana, because it's going to cause you to not be able to get certain jobs, and it also affects your motivation level. So, but the one kid that I'm thinking about, he's done really well in school. So in his case, it didn't affect his motivation level in a negative way.
Tim, we're going to highlight Zach Bowling on our graduate panel this afternoon, who I know has a long history at 21st Mortgage with your CFO, Rich Ray, one of our founding board members. Right. So hopefully our audience will tune in to learn more about that success story later this afternoon. Beth, what about you? You also serve as a mentor. Why is it important that you serve, and any favorite stories?
Well, so I was a first generation college student, and a long time ago when I went to college, it wasn't quite as I mean, at least I went to a small private Christian school. We were kind of handheld through the process. Today, that experience is very different. And before coming to Rutherford County, I worked at a community college in Virginia and in workforce development, but I was across from the bursar's office. And so I would see those students, first generation students, coming in and just kind of lost, trying to figure it all out. And realized that, if we're going to support something, we need to also be a part of that. So I have two students that are in college now, and I think they have benefited from mom maybe knowing too much, not admitting to being a helicopter mom, but just having my husband and I did go to college, so we've got that information to share with them. We're in the workforce and this is kind of what I do for a living, so we can provide that kind of support and experience and answer the hard questions. There's so many students, particularly those that take advantage of Tennessee Promise, that don't have that support. Not that their parents may not want to, but they just don't know where to go to find the answers. And I think Tim's point about motivation is really important on that student side, but it's also having the right motivation as a mentor. So yes, the chamber does. We promote and push out to our chamber members and our community every year to try to get close to usually 500 mentors in Rutherford County. And a lot of times when we send out information, I'll get an email back from someone and they'll say, well, I tried that last year and the kids just didn't reach out. So I don't think I was much help. And I think as adults and as mentors, we need to look at what is our motivation. Are we doing it to, yes, check a box and make ourselves feel good? Or are we there to really help support the students? We don't know what impact a text message is going to make on a student. They may not respond to us, but I think just knowing that somebody cares and maybe they're in an environment that they don't have that, I think we don't understand the impact that we are making, even if we don't get the feedback that we hope we get from those students. So it's all about our motivation. And so I think it's really important that we step back and do what's right for our students, not necessarily what makes us feel good.
Absolutely. We had a panelist earlier today, Dr. Ashford, the president of Chattanooga State, talking about a student going on stage when she was at Pellissippi and talking about the impact she made, and she didn't even realize the student was receiving her text messages. And so sometimes those nudges really make more of a difference than you know. Chelsea, I know you've served as a mentor previously, and I know you have, again, more than 100 mentors from your company every year. Any favorite stories from you personally or out of BlueCross BlueShield?
Well, you mentioned why it was important. I don't like to ask anyone to do something that I haven't done myself. So I wanted to make sure that I had the experience and got the opportunity to really connect with these kiddos too. And I will tell you, this is actually kind of embarrassing, but I remember one mentor meeting at a local high school, and we were in this huge community space, and it was really, really loud, and it was time for us to kind of get to know each other. And I was going around kind of asking what each of the students was interested in and if they had a career in mind. And so this one young lady, she told me that she was into baking. And so I went off on this tangent about how great, that there's culinary schools and that she could take on. And then her father interrupted to tell me that I had misheard and that she had said banking. And so I had to kind of get over that moment of, all right, I look like an idiot. But it was a good learning experience for me because, you know, we're so used to, like, we just listen for the things that we're ready to hear, I guess. And I had not been listening as well as I should have been. And so every opportunity since, I've made a point to be a better listener, and to unspoken cues too, as well. Like Beth said, you know, you don't know, just because kids don't respond to the text messages, it doesn't mean that the students aren't appreciative of just knowing that you're there as a safety net. You know, I had a student one year that it came time to fill out the FAFSA, and it was literally a Saturday afternoon that she and I were back and forth on the phone, and I could hear her parents in the background, and they were thankful that somebody was helping walk it through. But, you know, it's not that they didn't want to be supportive, they just never had experienced it either. And so it was nice to know that it was not just a support for the student, but also for the family as well. And, you know, you've got all the same personality, you know, that you've got as much a variety of experiences as you do the personalities and the students that you're working with.
Yeah, each group can be so different. And I think it's one of the things we talk to mentors about. One year you may get 5 really motivated students. One year you may get 5 students with no support at home. And another year you may get a really good mix. We don't have a whole lot of information about them before we pair them. I've got a few more questions for our panelists, but I do want to remind our audience that if you would like to ask a question, you can do so in the Q&A box at the bottom. We're going to turn it over to your questions here pretty soon. So if you have those questions, please feel free to add them. Beth, I'm going to ask you this next. You know, on its face, the work that we're doing at tnAchieves with Tennessee Promise, we're getting to help students achieve their goals and their dreams. But ultimately what we're doing is workforce development. What type of advantage does that give you as a person who's recruiting business and industry into your region, but also our state as a whole, to have a program like this?
Well, I think it's tremendous. So, and I appreciate that tnAchieves recognizes that education starting in kindergarten is really about workforce development. I mean, why are we sending them to school? We want them to obtain the skills necessary to become productive citizens. So I think the more that we can help our educators at all levels understand that, the better off we'll be as a state and as a country. But for us, being able to, when we have a new company that's looking to relocate here, or a company that we're bidding for to help expand versus going somewhere else, the Tennessee Promise is always a part of that pitch, particularly for out-of-state companies that aren't familiar with the opportunity. And it certainly was a bigger aha moment for those companies early on. Now, other states have adopted similar programs, but I think one of our advantages too with Tennessee Promise is the connection with the mentor and the requirement that students do community service. One of the other things that we have attached that to is something that we call work ethic distinction. So we offer to all 4,000 roughly seniors every year in Rutherford County the chance to earn a work ethic distinction that sets them apart from other seniors, and they can earn points for certain standards like attendance and parties. We've added the tnAchieves component so that they have to earn their customer service, community service hours, but that they've also applied to college and met the tnAchieves standards. So that combined with our work ethic distinction is something that we now tout to companies to say, look, we're helping produce a work-ready community. We have students that have the work ethic as well as the skills because they're completing a post-secondary degree of some nature. So it is certainly a bonus for us from an economic development standpoint to be able to use those as recruiting tools.
Chelsea, I'm going to ask you a similar kind of workforce question. As a company with a statewide footprint, I know you have offices in Chattanooga, Nashville, and Memphis. You may have others across the state that I'm not as familiar with. But why for a company, I think you said 6,000 employees across the state earlier, why for a company like BlueCross BlueShield is it important that our state meets our Drive to 55 goals?
Well, for many of the reasons Beth just mentioned, not only is it about bringing in businesses, but it's about keeping our students here, those that are driven and call this home. You know, it's very important for us to have a pipeline to choose from, especially once these children improve. And well, I keep calling them children. Students, young students, as long as they have proven that they can set a goal and work their way through it, then they can have the world at their fingertips in terms of opportunities with businesses that exist here that are ready to hire individuals that are excited about living here in Tennessee and working in the workforce. I know for a fact we have actually hired some Tennessee Achieves students on our workforce at Blue Cross. And whenever this mentorship opportunity comes up and we post about it, they're the first ones to say, do it. The mentoring matters and these students need us there. And so I think that's why it's super important that this continues to be a success and that we have businesses that are bought in and supporting it with mentorships. Again, we all come from different backgrounds and the experiences that we've had vary. And I think that that's important when we think about the variety of background that these students have as well, so that we can support them at all levels and remove any concerns or anxieties and just be there to support them so that then they become even better employees when they're done with school.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've highlighted a few of those students that have come to work for Blue Cross Blue Shield. We've seen them in your newsletters and plucked some of that information out.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. And that's what we want to see. And we also have a lot of our previous students. We have 5 of them on staff now. I believe it's 5. And many of our graduates come back and serve as mentors. So it's really cool to see them come full circle like that. Tim, I'm going to kind of ask the last question of you before we wrap with some questions we ask everyone and then take some audience questions. But when we started this crazy Knox Achieves experiment 12 years ago, did you ever think we'd send 100,000 students to college? And as we reflect on this 100,000 students and take a quick pause to celebrate it, what should we be working towards next? What should our big goals be going forward?
Yeah, so the answer to your question is I had no way did I think we'd get to 100,000. So you mentioned earlier that I told Randy I'd help raise half the money. And so, Randy Boyd is a visionary leader. And by the time we had rolled it out to all the high schools in Knox County, Randy was looking at how we take it to all the contiguous counties. And I was thinking about, well, wait a minute, Randy, I signed up to raise half the money for Knox County. And so he's rolled it out to the contiguous county. And then I know he was thinking about statewide, and soon before long, he was taking it statewide. So Knox Achieves wouldn't have become tnAchieves without his leadership. And then the management, Chrissy's team and the management at Graham, the work you've done, and Chrissy, and there's no way we would have got to where we are without that drive. So the team has completely exceeded my expectations, and I'm so happy for what has been accomplished. The challenge going forward, though, is when you look at what we've accomplished, it's fantastic, but raising kids is not just the job of parents. It's a job of the community. And we've got to figure out a way to help these parents who are not well educated create more opportunities and see the value of getting a good education for their kids so that their kids can have a better life than they had. I mean, that was the goal of my parents. They were not well educated, but they wanted all of us kids there was 5 of us, and they wanted all of us to get a better future than they had. And all of us got some college. 3 of the 5 of us completed college, and then some of us got advanced degrees. But we've got to figure out a way to motivate the kids and their families to prepare for college. And I think tnAchieves does a good job with those who are almost prepared, because we've got the summer bridge program, and that program has proved to be very effective, and we need to expand that. But the real challenge is to what can we do for the kids who just aren't quite prepared? How do we get them the motivation to get prepared? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's something as a group, society, we've got to work on.
Yeah, Tim, I think we've all learned over the last 12 years, it's really hard to tell Randy Boyd no. I think I remember that fateful board meeting. Chrissy and I think we're the only full-time staff members at that point. Jackie, I think, was working as an intern when Randy looked at us and asked if we could operate 50 counties with 2 full-time staff, and we said yes, and had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Graham, when the governor committed to help get the state funding for tnAchieves, there was nobody more relieved than I was.
I can imagine. It's quite the lift to go from one county to 90. We wrap all these before we turn over to the audience questions. We've got 2 questions that we've asked all of our panelists. So the first question I'm going to ask all 3 of you is, what is something that you learned in your very first job? And when I say very first job, like for me, when I was 13 years old, I began umpiring Little League baseball games. So I'm talking about your very first job. But what is something you learned in that very first job that you still take and carry with you today? Tim, you want to go first?
Well, I'm going to use a story that my mentor, Jim Clayton, likes to tell. And he attributes this to his grandfather. I think he made that part up. But he says, when you got to swallow a frog, don't look at him too long. And if you got to swallow 2 frogs, swallow the biggest one first. And I think that so I didn't necessarily learn that on my first job, but I learned it early. If you've got a tough job to do, jump on it. And that applies to kids actually in high school and college. Do your homework, do it early, do it as soon as you know you've got to get it done, and you'll come out way ahead. And that applies also to any type of job that you have. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't want to swallow any frogs with this job. You haven't asked us to do that yet. Beth, what about you?
So I think what I learned in my first job, and I'll use my first job out of college, was never to be afraid to ask for help and never be afraid to put yourself out there for more opportunities. The more you ask for, the more I think you'll get.
Chelsea, what about you?
That's a great question. I think for me, my first real job was working at Starbucks, which was the combination of retail and food service, which I recommend for every student should have to do that. You learn an awful lot every day. But what I would say is I think it's to go into everything with an attitude of respect is probably the thing that I took most from that, because everyone you like to assume is doing their best job. But I know that I have to go in doing my best so that I can be reliable and people can depend on me, and that we're all in this together. There were a lot of toads swallowed in that job. I mean, it was cleaning restrooms and it's just really important for, I think, from a mentor perspective, especially when we're talking with students that are entering into the education system, to realize it's not all fun and games. And we recognize that, but the end result is getting through it and what opportunities are opened up because of having had the right attitude.
Absolutely. Chelsea, we'll ask the last question. We'll start with you. We'll go reverse order this time. As we stop and think about this, celebrate these first 100,000 students that we've sent to college, and we're thinking about the next 100,000 students, what advice would you have for those students? You have one big piece of advice. What would it be?
I'm going to go back to attitude. Everything boils down to attitude. And this is not just because I have an 11-year-old doing virtual schooling right now, but everything is about attitude. If you go at it with the right attitude, difficult things can become learning opportunities, and there's always something to take away from it. But I think that it's one of the hardest things to do, but I think that it's also one of the most important that we learn early on.
Absolutely. Beth?
I'll go back to the lesson I learned in my first job. Never be afraid to ask questions or ask for help. So before we got on, we're talking about Harry Potter and Hogwarts, and there's a line where Dumbledore tells Harry, help will always be given to those who need it. And I think it's help will always be given to those who ask for it. So never be afraid to ask of a teacher, of a staff member, of a mentor, those questions that you're afraid to ask, because there's always somebody that's going to be there to offer advice and help you out.
Really good advice. And something we heard from our student panel yesterday was to ask questions and ask for help when you need it. Tim, what's your biggest piece of advice?
Do your homework. It's that simple. You find out where your shortcomings are if you do your homework.
Tim's always planning ahead. Chrissy's going to come back now and ask us or take some audience questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Chrissy.
I'm going to recruit Tim to have a conversation with my 11-year-old Oliver, who I'm constantly Chelsea, I don't know about you, but all I do is remind
Preach.
about homework. Yeah. So Tim, come over. You'll get the Tim Williams boot camp. Do your homework. It's a constant.
I've seen Oliver. I think that kid is on top of it.
He's a pretty good kid. Absolutely. Okay, so a couple of questions. I think one is more if you put your mentor hat on. A mentor was on the Q&A asking about any advice on how to engage a student who perhaps has dropped out or maybe just dropped out of communication. Any tips from any of you on how to re-engage that student? We've all had them, right?
I'll jump in and offer that, everybody has different preferred communication styles. And there's a lot of options and your staff does a great job of providing some talking points and some different ideas of ways to keep in touch. But if originally you had contact with that student, I would go back to whatever you saw a good response from them with. So maybe you've reached a point where there's no forms due or anything like that, and you've just kind of been touching base by text message and don't hear anything. It might be worth giving a phone call if they had been responsive to that earlier on. But sometimes we need the reminder that these are individuals and they do have different comfort levels. And so trying to meet them where they're comfortable.
That's really great. I think establishing that in those early mentor meetings is super important. Really great, Chelsea. One of the things, go ahead, Beth.
No, I was just going to say one of the mistakes I made early on was like doing group texts. And then I realized, to your point, they want to be talked to individually. It's less intimidating to respond to one person than to respond in front of all their other peers. So that one-on-one communication is really, really important.
The only thing I would add to what they've said is to stay in contact with the parents as well, because a lot of these kids are being prodded by their parents a little bit and can be prodded a little more, so the parents can help.
Absolutely. And I think a big philosophy at Tennessee Achieves is to perseverance, right? Like we oftentimes joke that we are a program of borderline harassment when it comes to students. So maybe the 11th time they hear it, they will actually complete their FAFSA or complete their college application. And I think there's no shame in perseverance. When I train mentors over the last 12 years, I always say, don't let the 17-year-old hurt your feelings, right? You're the adult in this relationship. And so Beth, what you said really resonated. Like, what is your motivation for mentoring? Is it for you or is it actually for the student? And, Tim said so well that, the community does have some responsibility here in raising our children so they can be productive members of society. So I think, this is all cyclical in the grand scheme of things. All right, another question. How can education and business and industry continue to improve collaboration? 10 years when we first started this. So this Tennessee Achieves has always been governed by business people. And so when I was in rooms watching higher education or even K-12 education and workforce speak 10 years ago, it's sort of like was speaking a completely different language. And I do think we've improved, but how else can we improve in that space?
From a business perspective, I think that that it's important that we have a good finger on the pulse of what we're looking for in terms of hiring, not right this second, but kind of thinking a couple of years down the line, so that when we are looking for incentives or words of encouragement or motivation for our mentors, that we can share why it's so important that they are going through this difficult process and why it's so important to do your homework and why it's so important to do all of these things, that ultimately there is opportunity and doors that will open for what they are doing right now. Sometimes it's hard, especially when you are in a difficult situation, or if the forms feel overwhelming and you're not motivated, it's very hard to flip that switch and get back on a track that's going to keep you moving forward if you don't know what you're working towards, if you don't know where the track's leading. And so I think as businesses, we can continue to encourage young students to say, you all are our future. Like, we are reliant on you and the education that you're receiving and the experiences and exposure that you are getting, so that we can continue to be a success and offer you additional opportunities going forward.
I think that's really important perspective. Tim, did you have something?
No, I was just thinking about the question that you know, a lot of the kids don't really know what kind of opportunities are out there. And imagine being a junior in high school and needing to think about what are you going to do after high school. That's to me, that's scary. And I think as businesses, we can do a better job of holding field trips and helping kids understand what opportunities are in front of them, so that they understand what education they need to take advantage of those opportunities.
Why it's important.
Yeah, no, I think especially for first generation students, they need something tangible on the other end. It can't be just education for higher education's sake, right? And so making it tangible, that's why now community service at Tennessee Achieves is also job shadowing. Go spend time inside a business to decide if this is really something that you want to pursue. We always hear students, for example, who want to be engineers, but they hate math. And so putting these pieces together, I think, is incredibly important. Did you have something, Beth?
Just going to say, I think on both sides, both education and on the employer side, they need to get out of their way a little bit. So I say I'm really a professional dot connector. So trying to connect our employers to our schools and our schools to our employers, and understand that a relationship with an employer is not asking for a donation. And a relationship with an employer is getting to know them and developing a partnership that can be mutually beneficial. And if it turns out to be a donation for the football team, great. But ultimately, how is that opportunity with that employer impacting the greatest number of students? And on the employer side, I was just talking with an employer this morning about, again, getting out of their own way and actually hiring students. So if we want to help them understand the connection between engineering and math, give them a job. So the earlier we can get students working in meaningful employment, the better. So one of our best examples in Rutherford County is Ingram Content in Laverne. And so they're a book printer and distributor, and they've been in go mode for the last 3 years. They've hired each fall anywhere between 30 and 60 high school juniors and seniors to work after school for them. So they're meeting a workforce need, but they're teaching students how to work and to get engaged in supply chain management and even know what that is. So I think the schools had to open their doors to say, come on in and talk to our students, and the employers had to provide those opportunities. So I think it's a mutually beneficial and an opportunity for both education and employers to participate.
I completely agree. I think those are all great points. So about maybe a year ago, I was reading an article in Forbes magazine that said, workforce is calling, higher education, will you answer? And it talked about the skills that higher education needed to focus on in order to prepare students better for the workforce. I'm curious, from your different perspectives, what might that skill set be?
From my perspective, I would say communication skills and being able to set goals and manage it appropriately in terms of timing. I think that those three things are really important. Recognizing that there are multiple steps, how do you fit it into a timeline, and how do you meet a deadline? But then also, how do you communicate it? And so those things are going to happen regardless what industry you're in, what degree you go for. I think that it's something that is really translatable. If and when you're looking for a position, it can be a really strong indicator to an employer that you're ready to hit the ground running.
And in our case, we're really hiring people from practically any college in any degree program nearly. And it's because we're willing to train them after we get them. But you've got to have people who are smart enough, who've got some life experience, can relate, know how to work hard. Most kids are not going to get through college if they don't work hard. And so it's that mentality that we're after of being successful, and you can see it in the grades. I mean, if they got through with low C's, they're probably not going to be successful at our company. And so I don't know where I was going with that, other than just making the point. A lot a lot of kids go to school and they don't know what they want to major in. They don't necessarily major in something that leads to a job. If you end up with a psychology major, I'm not sure what you do with that unless you continue to get an advanced degree. But we hire psychology majors and they make really good team members. So because we'll train people to a specialty.
And I think what our universities, well, community colleges and universities need to do, again, it's that work component. So if I had my magic wand, every degree program would include a co-op or an internship, and a meaningful one, not just, hey, I'm checking the box, but something that is going to help give them the work skills, communication skills, but also the technical skills that they need to be successful. If you've never been taught to work, how do you magically walk out of a community college or a university and go, oh, now I'm the best worker there is, because I don't have that example to work from?
No, I think that's a really important point. I mean, Beth, you sit in these state meetings that we have together often, and it's rare that we're talking about, reading proficiency and math proficiency baseline, but it really is what used to be referred to as soft skills, right? That employers are really thinking about: communication. Can you work hard? Do you understand what it means when it's time to be at work? And I still don't know exactly what role higher education plays in that, but Tim's right. Like, if you can make it, I remember when I was going through my PhD program, one of the professors said, it's really not about like how well you do, it's about, can you survive it, right? And that it was sort of it's a marathon. And so I do think that there is a lot built in. I do think also that there are a lot of life experiences, right, that keep the student that Tennessee Achieves seeks to serve from really always being able to rise to the higher education occasion, if you will. And so I think there's still a lot of work for all of us to do, but I'm certainly excited to be celebrating our 100,000th student and appreciate the three of you and the role that you have played in our story over the last 12 years. We certainly could not be doing this work without you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Graham to conclude us, but from the entire Tennessee Achieves team, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
We've got just a few more minutes, and I've got one question, Tim, based off of something that you mentioned earlier. You talked about Mr. Clayton as a mentor of yours, and students in the program, as we've talked about, are assigned a mentor, but as they advance through their college careers and maybe into their early professional careers, how important is it for students to kind of, one, build their networks, but to find a mentor? And someone asked yesterday, how do you go about finding a mentor when maybe Tennessee Achieves doesn't just assign you one and you're beyond that? How do you find that person and build that relationship?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate coming out of college. I had 1 year of Drons Junior College, and then went to work at Clayton Homes and got to work directly with Jim Clayton, and he took a real interest in me. And that one thing that Jim has done, he demonstrated over and over, is always keep learning. And so Jim encouraged me to keep learning, and he encouraged me to go back to school and do my undergraduate degree at the university and get a degree in accounting, and then my master's degree. But that was one side of keep learning, but then it's also learning on the job. I mean, when Clayton Homes got computers, first guy that had a personal computer was Jim Clayton. And, he didn't have to do that. He did it because he always wanted to keep learning. And so he was a great role model, and he took a personal interest in me. And I'm so thankful that he did. I don't know how you find a mentor that'll take that much interest. I really don't. I'm willing to give my time to someone that asks for my time, but for me to take that much interest in somebody, I think you're just sort of lucky. If you find somebody that'll do that for you, you're just lucky. Parents will do it, but sometimes parents don't have the experiences to be a great mentor. And so I think we've got, through tnAchieves, we've got a lot of people who are willing to be mentors for kids, and the kids just need to embrace us. If they ask us for something, most of us will try to help them. And if there's any kids listening to this broadcast, I hope you'll ask. If you'll ask, chances are there's somebody that's willing to take an interest in you. And I will guarantee that I would. So anyway, that's where we are.
Beth, Chelsea, any great mentors and maybe advice for students in building those kinds of relationships as they're advancing through their careers?
Well, I'll just kind of piggyback on what Tim was saying. You know, I think one of the brilliant elements about Tennessee Achieves is that it is exposing students to the benefit that a mentor can be. You know, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but, you know, as we continue to grow and as we continue to learn in our own careers, you know, I can think back and I've had different mentors at different times in my life that kind of naturally fell into place based on what the needs were that I was experiencing. And I was comfortable doing that because I had been exposed to mentoring and because I knew that I could lean on others to gather experience from their perspective. So I think what tnAchieves is doing right now, I think is the first major step to encouraging students to ask for those sorts of things. And then I will second something Beth said earlier, in that I think students that learn to ask the questions are the ones that are going to be the ones that are comfortable asking someone, saying, you know, I just happened to sit in on this seminar. I loved what you had to say. You know, if you wouldn't have the time or ability or willingness to spend with me, do you have any suggestions of anyone that I could reach out to that might benefit me where I'm at right now? And so, you know, again, having them comfortable asking those questions and recognizing that that mentor that they get today, that we are for these students while they're in high school or in secondary, we may be able to meet our need, or, you know, what their needs are right now. And then they're going to need other needs. They're going to need other people and perspective to continue their growth process too.
Beth, any final words?
So I noticed in the chat, my coworker, fellow mentor, Kelly Beam is posted in there that she's willing to give anyone time that wants it. And so I think it's not just, yes, it's asking, but as a student, you have to show that you are committed to wanting the help. And so if you commit to something and then kind of flake out, then that's on you. And so I think most professionals are willing to give their time if they know that individual is serious about that conversation and wanting that relationship.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. Echo Chrissy's sentiments. You know, we can't do this work without our business and industry partners across the state, and you three are certainly leaders in your fields and have been instrumental in our success. Tim, for since the launch as one of our founding board members and someone I've learned just so much from, and Beth and Chelsea helping us lead in your communities and building that business and industry support, which is so important for our program, but also offers so much insight and practical experience for our students. So thank you all for your support over the last 6 to 12 years, and thank you for being here today.
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity.
Enjoyed it.
A great rest of your day. Have a good afternoon. And thanks to our
Bye-bye.
audience for tuning in today.
Thank you.
Bye.